11 of the fantasy football season. And here's a few tight ends I would start this week. The first guy, George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers. So Kittle, he came back a few weeks ago. Nothing but great the last 2 weeks here in his return is Kittle. Week 9 versus Arizona, 6 catches, 101 yards, a touchdown, and a fumble loss. In Week 10 versus the Rams, 5 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown. So right here, him and Jimmy G have a great rapport, no doubt about it. Kittle, the last few seasons, the injuries have really been a factor for him, but right now he looks pretty healthy in the 2 games back. In Week 11, he's got a great matchup at the Jacksonville Jaguars that give up the 12th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. And I think for the 3rd week in a row here, he's going to find the end zone is Kittle. And it wouldn't surprise me as well if he has 80 to 100 yards in this one. The next tight end I would start this week's Mike Gesicki of the Miami Dolphins. So Mike Gesicki, he's been pretty solid this year, no doubt about it. And a top 5 tight end in scoring, even though last week he had the old goose egg in Week 10 versus the Baltimore Ravens, which just was a fluky thing in my opinion. He had 7 targets, and he just couldn't catch any of them. But the last few games before that, Week 7 versus Atlanta, 7 catches, 85 yards, and a touchdown. Week 8 at Buffalo, 3 catches, 48 yards, and a 2-point conversion. And Week 9 versus the Houston Texans, 4 catches, 54 yards in that one. And then the goose egg versus Baltimore. But right here, Week 11, I think he gets right versus a weak New York Jet defense in the Life Stadium. And the Jets give up the 11th most fantasy points to tight ends. The Jets, they really can't stop anyone offense. They gave up 45 points 2 games in a row now. And I think Mike Gesicki in this one has a good one. And it wouldn't surprise me if he has 60 or 70 yards and finds the end zone in this ball game. The next tight end's Dalton Schultz of the Dallas Cowboys. So I know the last couple weeks here, Schultz has been disappointing for fantasy owners. Week 8 at Minnesota, 2 catches, 11 yards. Week 9 versus Denver, 4 catches, 54 yards. And then Week 10 versus Atlanta, he had a bad ball game. 1 catch for 14 yards on only 2 targets. But in that one, he just missed a touchdown. The ball went through his hands, or he would have had a good fantasy day, is Dalton Schultz. He would have finished with 11 fantasy points in PPR leagues. But right here, I think the Cowboys still believe in him. Blake Jarwin, we know he's going to be out for a while with his injury. And right here, Schultz and Dak have a great rapport, no doubt about it. So it's been a little bit of a down few weeks here for Schultz, but I think he bounces back with a great matchup on paper at the Kansas City Chiefs that give up the 7th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. Their linebackers aren't that great in coverage, and their defense is going to obviously focus on CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, and Michael Gallup and stopping the run. So I think Schultz in this one, he bounces back with a huge game, and it wouldn't surprise me to see him 50 yards and a touchdown in this one. The next tight end I would start this week is Hunter Henry of the New England Patriots. So Hunter Henry, he's been pretty solid in my opinion, in his first season in New England. He's a guy that's got a knack for the end zone, and Mac Jones loves targeting the big target in Hunter Henry in the end zone. So right here, Hunter Henry, Week 7 versus the Jets, 2 catches, 23 yards, a touchdown. Week 8 at the Chargers, a catch for 33 yards. Week 9 at the Panthers, 2 catches, 19 yards, and a touchdown. And Week 10 versus the Browns, 4 catches, 37 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So right here, Hunter Henry, we know he's a good target. And the only thing with him throughout his career is staying healthy and staying on the field. But so far this season, that's been the case. And this week, he's got a great matchup at the Atlanta Falcons, who can't stop anyone. We've seen teams all season go up and down the field, and most of their playmakers have big fantasy days. So right here, I think Hunter Henry in this one will at least reach double-digit fantasy points, and he's definitely a tight end I would start this week. And the 5th and final tight end I would start is Tyler Conklin of the Minnesota Vikings. So Conklin, he don't get as much respect as I thought he should this season. He's still available in 70% of fantasy leagues. In the last 3 out of 4 ball games, he's reached double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues. Week 8 versus Dallas, 5 catches, 57 yards. Week 9 at Baltimore, 5 catches, 45 yards. And Week 10 at the Chargers, 3 catches, 11 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I know that's a little bit fluky, obviously, here, the 2 touchdowns on 3 catches, but he's a big red zone target, and many defenses are rolling, obviously, to Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, their focus. So right here versus Green Bay, that gives up the 13th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. It wouldn't surprise me to see Tyler Conklin in this one have probably 50 yards at most and a touchdown, but he's definitely a tight end I would start this week, especially what he's been doing over the last few weeks. So that's a few tight ends I would start in Week 11 of the fantasy football season.